So with most of the things that I have been working on in the last couple of months, they serve multiple purposes. Number one, building things, specifically models, is a very relaxing, calming, quiet activity that you can do to give yourself, kind of decompress from the day and forget about the world and all the craziness that's happening and just kind of focus on something that you can control and that you can create on your own, and it's yours. It's 100% yours. It's not anybody else's idea except yours. The second thing is that they're all mechanisms for me. They're all mechanisms to forward the story in the adventures and the campaigns that I'm writing for the upcoming series that will be available to the general public next year. And number three, I really fell in love with the game the second time around by following and watching Acquisitions Incorporated. In that, they give a very fresh take on the mechanics of operating the game and functioning within the idea of a common setting, multiple people, and you essentially are doing a group storytelling activity. And the other thing I really liked about it was that it wasn't really based on grids and squares and mechanics and moving pieces on a board, and it was not heavy in the mechanics, it was not heavy in the numbers. It was much more geared towards the storytelling aspects and the role-playing aspects and the outsmarting of the players as well as the player characters, and giving them the opportunity to breathe within the environment and be funny and be creative and be clever without having to be bogged down with a lot of the minutia that can happen in a role-playing game as wide and deep as this is. So what I really liked about Ack Inc. was that much of it was theater of the mind, which means it was just discussing and talking and what would you like to do and here's what happens and please roll and all that stuff. And then there would be a boss battle or a climatic battle or a climatic scene that involved something fairly elaborate, and that would be represented by physical terrain as a set piece. And as over the 11, 12 years that they've been doing this, those set pieces have become larger and more elaborate and more wonderful and more integral to the story, and really allowed artists who do that to showcase their work, which is also very attractive to me in the way that those things were happening. Let's see if I can move over this way. As I was watching those videos, the one thing that happened in the 2014 game was that they built an airship, which the concept of which, to me, at that point, I hadn't really thought about, because I hadn't really played D&D in like 25, 30 years. But this concept was fantastic, and so the integration of that, I immediately started looking up how it was made and who made it and who built it, and I just started looking at pictures online that show all the different details. And so the first thing I want you to know is that this right here, that's a calligraphy pen top. That's probably a piece of jewelry that's been glued into that spot, and you can see the glue spot behind it. These are probably tongue depressors, and these pins were probably pushed in too deep, and they left some. The point is that at 10 feet or 15 feet, this model is astounding and amazing and imposing and impressive. But if you sat and stared at it at this closeness for an hour, you would find a million things that are 90% or 95% right, but not 100%. But it doesn't matter, because the representation of what was made and the way that it was presented and how it functioned within the world within which it operates, it doesn't need to be this hyper accurate, super realistic to the nth degree model, because number one, it's a ship that flies. There's no reference for that. It actually isn't a ship that would go into water because there's skids on it and there's a propeller on the back. And it's a fantasy game. It's for fun. So when you go to make things like this, if you're going to attempt an airship, sailing ship project, know that no one is going to scrutinize to this scale every little thing about what you produce, because that's just rude. It's just not necessary. And anybody who is going to take that seriousness probably is not someone you really want to take energy from in the first place. So relax. The way I did it was I learned some things as I was going, made a bunch of mistakes as I was going and kind of figured out how to make fewer mistakes the further along I went by taking more time to prepare. For example, the first thing that I did was I looked for some photographs of a boat. And for me, what I was wanting to do was I was really wanting to have something like a Chinese junk. To me, that it looks fast. It looks fast when it's not moving. It looks modern, even though Chinese junks have been around and the sailing rigs have been around for 2,500 years, 3,000 years. This was what was attractive to me in the shape of what I wanted to build, even if I didn't end up using it for the game, because it looked amazing to me. It just looks modern. It looks sleek. It looks futuristic, even though it's not from the future. It's from the past. So I found this model online that there's a bunch of these high-resolution pictures of. The model's like $400. And so I took these pictures, and I took one of the pictures, and I put it up against the screen. Where's that one page at? I put it up against the screen, and I traced the photograph. Oh, here it is. Sorry, I apologize. I traced it out because it was fairly isometric. It had the properties of this type of grid line paper almost perfectly. So I was able to kind of go from this being the center line to a 2D version of this drawing, because there was no 2D version from top down, from back, front, and side. There was one from the side, but for the profile, but not the others. So I was able to take that and make that kind of look like, let's see, where's my other one here? I was able to take this and make this work. Now, before I had that, I found this picture because I was looking online, because I knew boats were built this way when they actually built them. So I said, okay, certainly there must be some blueprint somewhere. So this shape was, in my brain, I was focused much more on the profile than I was this, and I didn't really pay attention to that. So when I basically cut each of these pieces out, I cut about 13 pieces out, and I put it together, it came out, oh goodness, sorry, whole system is brand new to me. Apologize. It's gonna get better. It came out looking like this. So from the side, it was the shape that I was looking for. You can see that up there in the corner, you can see the shape. This is the shape, but the rest of it is just horrific, because again, it was never designed to be that flat back, wide bottom, flat front as a Chinese junk, and I didn't pay attention to that. So I learned a lot on this. Actually, this is my session 0, to just get familiar with foam, how it glues up, how bulkheads glue together with a center spar, and I realized that this concept of making these solid pieces and doing some rim pieces around didn't work, because as you can see, it looks horrible. It's not straight that way. It's not straight that way. In no directions is this straight. So I knew that I couldn't do it this way. So when I went back to do this, when I went back here, I said, okay, when I get this right, I'm going to actually just make the bulkheads squares. So I just cut out a bunch of squares, and I took the squares and I made a centerpiece that was the exact shape of the profile of the boat. I made a center sheet that went all the way down the center and cut the boat in half this way. And then I glued up those squares onto either side of that. And then I began to shape them the way you see them here. So this is me cutting the center. The center of the boat is totally straight all the way down. So I know that's going to stay straight because it's an entire plane sliced down through the middle of the boat. And I also knew that it was going to define correctly the way that the boat should look from the side. I then cut those pieces out and started cutting them. So you can see that I started cutting them down to get, and I went slow. And this is me hand drawing on one piece and then cutting it by hand and getting it to where I want to get it. Then I knew I needed to take the boat. I needed to take the boat top and bottom and make two pieces. One that could lay flat on the playing surface, and when it was suspended, one could come up top and show the bottom of the boat that way. So it was a complete model in both places. So what I did was I took my ruler, I put my ruler on the edge of the boat, I drew that across the little nubs here, here and here and here, here and here and here and here, and then I started cutting. And so this is cutting. You can see the drawing that I made. The hand, again, I had to guess at what I thought the back of the boat should look like, having worked off of the original session 0 and realized that there was more back here than there was up here. So I put a bunch of those lines back here to give me more opportunities to get that shape right. And this is what I came up with. I also added these pieces in between. This center spine is one single piece. I added these pieces in between when I was putting it together to give it more strength side to side. And so this is what happens after it's cut. Then it's just a matter of taking a flat piece about the shape of the bottom of it and glue the whole thing down. Because you're basically going to take two and you're going to glue them together. And that's going to be the top and the bottom of your boat right there, top and bottom. And they're going to mate up. Leave those pieces long because you're going to then take, the next step is going to be to glue up the sides or the skin on the boat to this, and you want to have a starting point. So this is, I took this template here, I took that, and I put the piece up against it, and I drew exactly where the styrofoam was, and then I went an inch over, and I drew another line, and I cut on that inch. And that's what I used to make what you see in that picture, is I use this as my template because, again, when you're making two halves of something that need to be the same, which is the word chiral, is you need those to be the same. They need to mirror each other. So by making this template, I could cut it this way, I could flip it over and cut it this way, and then those two pieces will be, for all intents and purposes, the same, but mirrored. So again, I then put in the beginnings of what you would do for planking or making wood by running lines. I noticed that on the boat itself, I noticed that a lot of the way that the sides of the boats were, you can kind of see right in here, the sides of the boats here. Sorry, let me just transition back to this. You can kind of see on here that it's not grain so much as this is a better shot here, is that it's a very tight grained wood. And the only where you see a lot of heavy indentation striations are these kind of hole protective pieces on the side, which I liked, and I thought those would be nice details for the end, so I ended up adding those to the boat. But again, it's very smooth wood, and some very smooth wood here, so I didn't worry too much about trying to get grain per se, as I was trying to at least get the boat to have some type of visual movement along the sides, some visual movement with the lines that you put into it, help to sell that energy. Let's see, so where am I at here? Okay, that's that. Oops, sorry. So again, this is me gluing up the one side. The way I did it was I started with the back of the boat. There, I did the back of the boat, so I took this piece and here's the boat. Here's the back of it. I glued that there. Glue, 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 and then glue, and then glue, and then glue. So it was easier on the top than the bottom. You'll see why in a second. But again, once you get that first part anchored, you glued down and anchored, it's there. It's not going anywhere. And then you go a little more and go a little more and go a little more. So again, it was relatively easy to get the first piece in because again, the glue is the hot glue. Doesn't have to be expensive hot glue or an expensive gun. I think the glue gun I have is like $2, and the hot glue I buy cheaply. The glue helps to keep everything in place and hold it together. Again, you can see some gaps. Doesn't matter. It's going to be fixed. It's going to be fixed. It's going to come out fine. Let that roll. Let the shape present itself. So now I had to cut the back off because it clearly was not. So when I cut this piece off right here, I realized that I could probably use that to start shaping the other piece on the other side. So then I lined it up and I said, all right, let me draw it. And I ended up drawing it, maybe drew it freehand. But again, there it is being drawn like that right there. And again, that's the starting point of your gluing process. Right down in there, glue that up, hold it down, glue it up, hold it down, and just curve it around. And so you having that relationship with the object and having that journey and taking that journey together will allow you to be able to accomplish all these different pieces and construction pretty easily. Just take it easy, go slow, step at a time, step at a time, step at a time, double check and make sure everything's matching, and eventually you end up with that. And it's solid because of the way that it's constructed off of the way a boat would actually be built, plus the flat bottom. You have rigidity in every single direction, which you want in a model that's going to get dropped or bounced or whatever on your playing surface. So again, you can see that there is quite a bit of rigidity in every direction and axis just by the way it was put together, which also was put together that way to make sure that you have control over the shape. There really are no shortcuts from what I can see to get this level of control and structural integrity on the model you're using, especially for something that's not just going to sit up on a shelf. This is going to be put down on the board, it's going to be moved around, there's going to be stuff bounced on it, there's going to be miniatures thrown on it. You want it to kind of be sturdy. Again, so here's the second piece that goes on, mating up with the first, and then cut to trim. Although the two pieces don't match perfectly, one kind of overlaps the other, it's not going to matter because the final shape is the final shape, and as long as the final shape is down that axis, down the center, which it is, you're fine. This is me laying up the deck, again with the same striations on the deck as I did on the side of the boat. You make the shape, slide it in, see where it's off, take some trim, slide it in, take some trim it up until you get where you want. I left it long on the top of the front and back because you just leave pieces long until you're ready to start trimming up, so that you know that your registration is correct. This is me drawing the lines for the deck and getting those striations in for the grain. This is me realizing that I had a gap here in the back that was just a result of the two pieces kind of peeling away from each other. I do address that by creating a little sliver of I just took two other pieces and made a little V and put a little tiny little thin V on the back to kind of fill in that gap. At the end, I don't know how much it really helped because it was challenging to do. This is me doing the bottom. The bottom was very difficult because you have the back of the boat is like this, and then the rest of it is like that. So as you can see in this particular video, and all this footage will be available at some point once we get done, you kind of have to score the plastic, the foam. And if you score it too deep, as you can see, I scored it too deep here and here, it will split open and lose the ability to curl around that shape in an organic way. So this is me kind of going back in and adding some more cuts to give it the ability to be formed and shaped and formed and shaped and formed and shaped, because you really have to, you have to kind of, it is a relationship between these materials and your hands and your vision. And it is going to try to test your patience, but you just have to just go step by step and a little section by a little section, and get yourself the ability to just kind of push it in and throw some glue in there and get it to conform in one area. Hold it, wait for the glue to dry, wait for it to cure, hold it down, be patient. And then once it's done, you move on to the next section. So again, pushing it in place, it'll form pretty well. The glue kind of gives it a little bit more pliability when it gets warm. And again, this is me working it out, and you just got to take it step by step, get it up to the top, trim it out the bottom, and then trim the bottom piece. I trimmed it to leave an edge, the thickness of a piece of foam, so that I could take the keel piece and just slide it in and glue it all together. Again, you can see the gap there. This is the second piece going in. All this footage will be available eventually in its entirety if you want a more in-depth look at how this works. But this is just an overview. So this is me just kind of working out and saying, okay, I got the bottom done, I got the top done. How does this look? Before I trim off those excess, I want to see if it's right. And it was coming out better than expected. Of course, you see those two gashes that I have there. That's fine. It is what it is. So again, what I did now was I knew that this edge was kind of sharp from this way to this way, and I didn't like that. So what I did was I made these registrations, and then I actually drew a bunch right here. I drew back and forth, draw back and forth, draw back and forth, so that when I cut it, I know that I'm cutting into that area. And I know that I'm actually working through that area to shape that corner to get it right the way I think it should look. Again, what do I know? But it seemed like a sharp, here's me trimming it off a little bit at a time. Just kind of, and once you get this all put together, it's almost like a sculpted model where you can go in and make those kinds of adjustments to kind of smooth out some of those edges that didn't seem to work right. Yeah, so here's me drawing the lines. Again, this is like a sculptor's thing, and a woodworker's thing, and even a steelworker's thing, where you'll kind of draw out where you're intending to work, and then you start working in that area to start shaping that area. And you don't want to go too deep, but you certainly want to just lightly, and really the bigger the knife, the lighter the touch, because it's a large surface and it's easier to, that's the reason why I kind of gouged those other pieces with it, because I think I was using too small of a knife. But again, just to try to get a good shape and then test it up and see where you're at. And just go back and look on the other side and kind of shape that out a little bit too. And then say, okay, and again, a little bit, doesn't have to be a lot, because no one's going to know at the end of the day what you're doing except for you. Again, there's me making the registration marks where I know for sure the top and the bottom need to meet. And this is me trimming out. I trimmed the piece now. I trimmed it down to give it its final shape from top to bottom. There's the V that I had to add in the back because there was a gap. This is me gluing up the keel. And again, making sure there's a groove about the width of, a little bit less than the width of the foam. All I did was take a straight foam piece about 1/4 inch high, maybe even 3/8 of an inch high. Again, it's not curved, it's just straight. And just made a straight piece. Shoved a bunch of glue in there and just pushed it down in. Again, once you get the front, it's in. You get the middle, it's in, and it just goes the way it's supposed to go. And it hides all of those seams, and all those seams work well together. So whatever the shape of the boat whatever the shape of the boat you choose, when you get that bottom right, it's easy to pretend like you did it perfectly when you cut out a groove and you just put something that's already, by nature, a piece of foam is already the right shape. So when you put this in there, when you put that in the edge, you already have this shape that's correct. And the eye will forgive all the other irregularities from one side to the next. It'll forgive that completely because of the fact that this is actually a regular perfect shape. So there you finished out the front. I did a trim piece on the front, top and bottom. Trimmed out the back, and now I'm working on the sails. So this will be the end of the first part, and I'll come back in just a second and show you the rest.